Have you ever laughed at an invention and thought, who in the world would use this? Well, history proves, more often than not, that it's the so-called stupid ideas that change the world. Today, we're diving into 30 inventions that were once considered completely useless, ridiculous, or even dangerous. But in modern times, they've become absolutely essential. And no, we're not talking about smartphones or social media. These are real-world, everyday inventions that don't rely on Wi-Fi, RAM, or cloud storage. Let's start with one that literally protects us from the storm. 1. Umbrella. The umbrella, as ordinary and essential as it may seem today, had a surprisingly rocky start. Its earliest origins trace back to ancient China, where it wasn't just a shelter from the sun or rain, but a symbol of royalty and high status, reserved for emperors and nobles. It wasn't meant for common use. It was about power, not practicality. When umbrellas finally made their way to Europe centuries later, they were mocked, especially by men. The idea of shielding oneself from rain was seen as a sign of weakness. Real men, it was believed, braved the weather. But today, the umbrella is everywhere. Used by children walking to school, CEOs in tailored suits, and street vendors alike. What was once a symbol of snobbery or cowardice is now simply a smart choice. The umbrella didn't just shield us from storms. It weathered one of its own. 2. Bicycle. When the bicycle first appeared in the 19th century, society didn't know what to make of it. It looked odd, unstable, and was widely ridiculed as a rich man's novelty or a dangerous contraption. Doctors even warned that cycling could damage your health and fertility. But despite the sneers and skepticism, the bicycle endured and evolved. Over time, it became not just a leisure activity but a symbol of independence and freedom. In congested cities and rural villages alike, the bicycle now serves as a tool of empowerment, clean, affordable, and efficient. The very same wheels that were once laughed at now carry dreams, groceries, and sometimes even entire families across countries. 3. Tomatoes. It's hard to believe that the humble tomato, the star of pizzas, pastas, and countless sauces, was once considered a poison. When it arrived in Europe from the Americas, people were fascinated by its vibrant color but feared its effects. Some aristocrats who ate tomatoes did fall ill, but not because of the fruit. Their lead-based plates reacted with the tomato's acidity, creating toxic compounds. The tomato was unfairly demonized. For centuries, it was grown as an ornamental plant. Beautiful, but deadly. And yet, it waited patiently for redemption. Today, the tomato is the backbone of entire cuisines, essential to comfort food and gourmet dishes alike. The fruit that was once feared now nourishes billions. A quiet triumph of taste over myth. 4. The fork, that most basic utensil on our dinner tables, was once treated as a scandalous foreign oddity. When it was introduced to Europe in the Middle Ages, religious leaders condemned it. God gave us fingers, they argued. Why insult his design with metal claws? Using a fork was seen as pretentious, even sinful. But slowly, practicality won out. Hands were messy, after all, and the fork was cleaner, more precise. Over time, the fork went from being taboo to indispensable. Not just a tool of etiquette, but of hygiene and modern life. It's funny how a few prongs of metal could cause such outrage, and yet today, no one bats an eye as we twirl spaghetti or slice a steak with one. 5. Paper money. When paper money first emerged in ancient China, it was a revolution waiting to happen, but the world wasn't ready. To many, the idea was laughable. How could a piece of paper be as valuable as metal? For centuries, societies clung to coins, viewing paper currency as too vulnerable to fraud, fire, and fantasy. But paper had something metal didn't: scalability. It was easier to print, transport, and standardize. Over time, paper money enabled complex economies, centralized banking, and the rise of capitalism itself. Today, it's so normal we barely notice it. We trade it for coffee, cars, and even our time. What was once dismissed as flimsy and fake now holds the power to move nations. 6. Stethoscope. It began with discomfort. A French doctor in 1860 hesitating to press his ear to a female patient's chest. So, he rolled a sheet of paper into a tube and discovered he could hear her heartbeat more clearly. Thus, the stethoscope was born. At first, it was mocked. Colleagues ridiculed the idea of needing a device to listen when God gave you ears. But science didn't care for ridicule. The stethoscope proved to be more than a tube. It was a window into the human body. Today, it's a symbol of medicine itself. That once laughed-at paper tube now represents care, precision, and life-saving diagnosis around the globe. 7. Canning. When food canning was invented in the early 1800s, it was met with raised eyebrows and wrinkled noses. People distrusted the idea of food sealed in metal. It seemed unnatural, risky, but war has a way of pushing progress, and Napoleon's army needed preserved rations. Canned goods proved their worth, though it would take decades for the general public to embrace them. Eventually, the convenience of canned food, its long shelf life and portability, won people over. Today, it's hard to imagine a pantry without at least one can of soup, beans, or tuna. What began as a military experiment now feeds the world. 8. The earliest parachute designs were considered acts of madness. The idea that you could jump from a great height and survive, float, even, seemed like lunacy. Daring inventors were laughed at, or worse, ignored. Some early testers didn't survive their attempts. But slowly, the parachute evolved from a dream into a dependable device. It became a lifesaver for pilots, a staple for soldiers, and eventually, a thrill for adventurers. What was once seen as a death wish is now a safety net. Quite literally, the parachute didn't just defy gravity, it defied doubt. 9. Train travel. In the early 1800s, as steam engines were developed, many people believed that high-speed travel would be harmful to the human body. Some doctors claimed it would cause insanity, organ failure, or even make a woman's uterus fall out. Newspapers warned of melted faces and exploding lungs. But none of those horrors materialized. Instead, trains connected cities, accelerated industry, and united nations. From the thundering steam engines of the Industrial Revolution to the silent speed of bullet trains today, rail travel is one of the most transformative inventions in history, and it almost got derailed by fear. 10 braces. Dental braces were once bulky, painful, and stigmatized. Kids who wore them were teased mercilessly. Metal mouth wasn't a compliment. Adults avoided them altogether. Yet, those awkward wires worked. They straightened teeth, corrected bites, and improved overall health. And then, something changed. Braces became a rite of passage. Clear aligners made them less visible. Celebrities began flaunting their perfect smiles. Today, orthodontics is both a medical necessity and a cosmetic investment. What once invited ridicule now earns respect and flawless selfies. 11. Washing machine. In the early 20th century, the washing machine was seen by some as an indulgence, unnecessary, and even suspicious. Many women, who traditionally handled laundry by hand, believed machines couldn't do the job right. But washing clothes by hand was grueling, time-consuming labor. Slowly, the washing machine proved itself, not just in performance, but in freedom. It liberated hours from domestic drudgery, giving people time for work, education, or rest. What was once dismissed as a noisy gimmick is now one of the most essential appliances in modern life. 12. Corkscrew. When wine bottles transitioned from open jugs to sealed corks in the 1600s, the corkscrew arrived quietly, but many people found it unnecessary. Why complicate a good drink with a device that required twisting and pulling? Over time, though, the corkscrew became synonymous with celebration. It's the silent prelude to toasts, romantic dinners, and late-night confessions. You may not notice it much until you need it. The corkscrew taught us that sometimes, to access something good, you have to dig in and twist a little. 13 zippers. When zippers first appeared, they were awkward and unreliable. Buttons were trusted, proven, and elegant zippers were loud, ugly, and strange. Designers scoffed. But the zipper had something buttons didn't: speed. Over time, its design improved, and it snuck quietly into boots, bags, jackets, and jeans. Today, it's practically invisible, yet everywhere. The zipper didn't ask for attention. It simply worked, and eventually, the world zipped up and moved on. 14. Toothbrush. Imagine a time when people used cloth or twigs to clean their teeth, or didn't clean them at all. That was daily life before the toothbrush became mainstream. Even when bristle brushes were introduced, many viewed them as unnecessary or uncomfortable. But as dental science advanced, the toothbrush emerged as a simple weapon against decay and disease. Today, brushing is so routine that skipping it even once feels wrong. The toothbrush may be small, but it's one of the most powerful tools in the fight for health and fresh breath. 15. High heels. High heels began as a practical invention for Persian soldiers needing stability in stirrups. When they spread to Europe, noblemen adopted them to appear taller and more authoritative. But eventually, they fell out of favor for men and were embraced by women as symbols of elegance. Yet even then, they were criticized as impractical, uncomfortable, even oppressive. But love them or hate them, high heels endured, walking red carpets, boardrooms, and runways. Their fashion, rebellion, confidence, and sometimes pain. What started as a horseman's tool became a cultural icon. 16. Buttons. When buttons first appeared as decorative items in ancient times, they weren't even used to fasten clothing. They were just ornaments. For centuries, people preferred pins, strings, or brooches. In fact, when buttonholes were finally introduced in medieval Europe, they were considered extravagant and overly complicated. Many scoffed, saying a loop or a belt did the job just fine. But over time, the button proved to be more than just flair. It offered precision, convenience, and a tidy appearance. Today, buttons are on everything, from shirts to blazers to your jeans. That tiny, once useless trinket became the quiet master of modern fashion. 17. Eyeglass. When eyeglasses emerged in the 13th century, they were awkward, heavy, and reserved for monks or scholars. Many believed that if your eyesight was failing, it was divine punishment. something to endure? Not correct. Eyeglasses were ridiculed, and their wearers often labeled as weak or vain. But as literacy spread, so did the need to see clearly. Slowly, glasses evolved in design and acceptance. Today, they're a $100 billion industry, essential for billions, and even a fashion statement. The world became more legible, one lens at a time. 18 alarm clock. The ancient Greeks had water clocks, and the Industrial Revolution had knocker-ropers. People paid to tap on windows to wake workers. So when the mechanical alarm clock was invented in the 19th century, it was initially seen as excessive and unnecessary. Why automate something a rooster or neighbor can do? Critics argued. But as cities grew and routines tightened, waking up on time became essential. Today, alarm clocks, whether on your phone, wrist, or smart speaker, are how the world begins its day. What started as a luxury is now how civilization stays on schedule. 19. Toothpaste. Ancient civilizations had crude mixtures for dental hygiene, like crushed bones, charcoal, and ash. But when modern toothpaste first appeared in the 1800s, people scoffed. Many claimed it was a scam, unnecessary compared to chewing sticks or just rinsing with water. It took decades of dental research and advertising to convince the public. Today, brushing with toothpaste is non-negotiable, not just for fresh breath, but for preventing cavities, disease, and embarrassment. The tube that once sat untouched on pharmacy shelves now holds the key to modern hygiene. 20. Mirror. In ancient cultures, mirrors were considered magical or vain, tools for witches or narcissists. Even when glass mirrors became common, many saw them as strange and unsettling. Why gaze at yourself every day? In some societies, mirrors were even avoided in homes out of superstition. But the mirror quietly became central to self-care, fashion, grooming, and medicine. Today, we rely on mirrors to understand how we present ourselves, to the world and to ourselves. What was once suspicious became essential for some. 21. Roller skates. When roller skates were introduced in the 18th century, they were seen as clumsy and impractical. Early models had no brakes, and people crashed into walls for fun. Critics laughed them off as carnival toys. But roller skates eventually found their rhythm, from retro diners to Olympic sports. They became symbols of freedom and community, especially in inner cities and youth culture. And now, in every skating rink and sidewalk jam, they roll proudly as a joyful invention that refused to be taken seriously, until it couldn't be ignored. 22. Pencil eraser. The eraser was once thought of as cheating. Early scholars believed that errors should be crossed out, not erased. Mistakes were part of the process. But the invention of the rubber eraser in the late 1700s quietly changed everything. Suddenly, ideas could be edited, refined, and perfected. Today, the eraser is more than a piece of rubber. It's a symbol of forgiveness, learning, and second chances. In classrooms, studios, and boardrooms, it reminds us that mistakes are not the end. They're part of the masterpiece. 23. Velcro. When Swiss engineer George de Mestral invented Velcro in the 1940s, inspired by burrs stuck to his dog's fur, he was met with ridicule. The fashion industry laughed it off. Who would wear noisy plastic strips? But NASA saw its potential, using it for astronaut suits in zero gravity. Suddenly, Velcro was everywhere, in shoes, jackets, sports gear, and medical equipment. Today, it's fast, easy, and reliable. Velcro taught us that sometimes, nature is the best engineer. 24. When crayons were first marketed to children in the early 20th century, adults dismissed them as cheap, messy, and unimportant. Real art, they said, came from pencils and brushes. But crayons became more than wax sticks. They became tools for creativity, imagination, and self-expression. In tiny hands, they created worlds. Crayons are now part of childhood globally, sparking early development in color recognition, coordination, and storytelling. What began as a toy became a child's first language. 25. Yoga mats. In ancient India, yogis practiced on bare ground or animal skins. When sticky yoga mats were introduced in the 1980s, purists scoffed. Yoga needs discipline, not padding, they said. But the mats offered safety, grip, and accessibility. They welcomed beginners, comforted elders, and encouraged millions to start their practice. Today, yoga mats aren't just for yoga. They're used in Pilates, stretching, meditation, and workouts worldwide. A once dismissed luxury now grounds millions, literally and spiritually. 26. Sewing machine. When Elias Howe invented the sewing machine in the mid-1800s, tailors rioted. They feared machines would steal their jobs and ruin craftsmanship. Many refused to use them, but as demand for clothing rose and prices dropped, the sewing machine proved its worth in homes, factories, and fashion houses. It didn't destroy the tailor, it redefined the industry. Today, it empowers designers, entrepreneurs, and creators worldwide. 27. Windshield wipers. When Mary Anderson invented the windshield wiper in 1903, male automobile manufacturers told her it was a distraction and too complicated. Drivers preferred to stick their heads out in the rain. But eventually, safety and common sense prevailed. Today, windshield wipers are required by law. They save lives in storms and snow, clearing the path ahead. Her once dismissed invention became a standard in every car on Earth. 28. Shopping cart. When the first shopping cart rolled out in 1937, people refused to use it. Shoppers found it awkward. Men thought it made them look weak. Women said it reminded them of baby carriages. Stores even hired actors to push carts and make them look popular. Eventually, convenience won. Today, carts are not just useful, they're the foundation of self-service shopping. The invention that once required fake fans now carries our real groceries. 29. Coffee filter. In 1908, German housewife Melita Benz poked holes in a brass pot and used her son's blotting paper to strain coffee grounds. The result? Clean, smooth coffee. But her invention, the paper coffee filter, was considered silly by many men in the industry. Real coffee doesn't need paper, they grumbled. But coffee drinkers disagreed. Today, her filters brew billions of cups a year. Her name, Melita. A homemaker's hack became a morning ritual. 30. The toothpick was once seen as crude, even offensive. In polite society, cleaning your teeth at the table was considered disgusting. But over time, the toothpick found its place. Not at the table, but afterward. Restaurants, dentists, and convenience stores began offering them, recognizing their practical role in oral care. They even became cultural symbols, from Western movies to mafia flicks. Today, toothpicks are everywhere. Humble, disposable, but quietly effective.